Hi there. Welcome to the Indies podcast, where we chat to people who've taken unconventional career paths and learn how they got there. So, for today's episode, I'll be chatting to Joel Connolly, and we'll be talking all things creativity and why he thinks it's so important. We also touch on his first job, where he had to sort of buckle the screws, um, and we learn how he actually ended up in his current job from there. And lastly, we also hear about his take to the question of what do I do when I don't know what I want to do? And towards the end, I'll also have a reflection segment where I just give my takeaways and my thoughts from the conversation. So aside from that, I hope you enjoyed the episode and take something away from it. All right, thanks so much for coming on a podcast. Uh, so just to start off, could you just like introduce yourself and also just talk about like what sort of makes you excited to get up in the morning?
Yeah, sure. Okay. Well, thanks for having me, Ev. I really appreciate it. My name's Joel Connolly. I'm the creative director of Blackbird Ventures, and I'm the head of the Blackbird Foundation. Blackbird Ventures is a venture capital firm. We invest in startups and high growth technology companies. Blackbird Foundation is about inspiring and unleashing creativity in young people. And we believe in the foundation that creativity is the meta skill. Like if you have creativity, you can learn and figure everything else out if you've got that one thing. What gets me out of bed every day? Man, like I love my work for starters. It's really inspiring working at a place like Blackbird for a number of reasons. I think, firstly, we have a really big mission that seems it's sort of funny to say this stuff outside of the company, but we believe in giant leaps forward made by a passionate few, and we try and invest in wild hearts with the wildest ideas right at the beginning. But fundamentally, what all that means is that we try and find people who want to create massive change in the world, and we help them do it. So, and our primary means at the moment of helping them is with capital. So we give them money, and they give us equity of their business, which means we get a small percentage ownership in their company in exchange for the money we give them. But essentially, it's like following these people, finding them, following them, and then just trying your hardest to help them succeed. And so those sorts of people are typically they're founders of technology companies, but we have invested in companies that you wouldn't necessarily consider technology companies. But we've got all kinds of things like we had dudes trying to make cars drive themselves. We've got people 3D printing complex human cell structures to improve the speed at which cancer researchers can do their experiments. We've got a design platform, a company called Canva who's built a software product that, helps people, anyone, design really beautiful things. We've got a company inventing a new kind of solar panel. We've got companies who are trying to replace meat itself as like one of the primary sources of protein that human beings consume. The main reason for that is the effect it has on climate change. There's just so many things, right? So we get up every single day. What gets me up is knowing that my job in some small way contributes to helping those people. Um, and then the other side of my job, the foundation, is just super inspiring. Getting up and being able to meet people who are working towards developing creativity in young people. When you believe that creativity is like the center of everything, and if like a person's creative, they can do anything and be anything, and they'll probably be happier if they are creative. That's like super inspiring. Like it's fun to get up knowing that I'm doing again work that contributes in some small way to that mission.
Yeah. So when you mention creativity, could you just expand more on like what you mean by that?
Sure. So most people, when they think of creativity, they associate it with the arts, and they associate creativity with artistry. So they think painters, they think dancers, they think, musicians. But the truth is, and this isn't controversial, that creativity is actually like like primary core cognitive function. It's one of the things that makes human beings so unique compared to every other form of life that we know. Creativity enables you to, well, imagination is what it starts with. Every single person has an imagination, and that's the ability to just conjure up things that are not present to your senses. Creativity is taking that imagination and using it and doing something with it. I believe that the best person in any field is creative fundamentally. The best doctors are creative. The best scientists are creative. The best mathematicians are creative. The best photographers are creative. The best venture capitalists are creative. I think fundamentally creativity sits up there. And so what we're trying to do, like not a lot of people view creativity in that way. Like I said, they see it as this thing that, only artists and rare people have. But the truth is, every single one of us is born creative. And what happens is over time, that creativity just isn't developed. And that's, due to the education system we have, due to the way that we raise children, we push them down these narrow kind of linear pathways. We take away their ability to sit within ambiguity. Like we don't expect them to face the unknown very often. And if you take those things away, plus a whole bunch of other stuff, it just doesn't develop the muscle of creativity. And so, we believe everyone's creative. And if we can do some work to try and unleash that creativity, then we'll be raising a generation of kids who are just far better equipped to deal with the world that's coming at them. A world that's super complex in nature, that has these like major, gnarly global problems, that's going to require young people to do different things throughout their whole life. Like you're never going to be able to learn one thing when you're 20 and still do that thing over and over again for the rest of your life. Like the way that you're going to grow up is and exist in the world is ever changing. And creativity is, we think, the way that you deal with that.
Yeah, so like do you think that our current education system sort of doesn't encourage that creativity?
It tries to. It's not that it's, some evil system that's trying really hard to like rob children of their creativity. I think, I mean, I could speculate as to why or how we've gotten to this point, but I think the way it works at the moment is you have these giant bureaucratic systems built on the idea that, education, children should be measured on what they do and how they perform. And in order to get fair measurement, you have to standardize your tests. And when you have standardized tests and measurement that's meant to be uniform and rank each child equally, you end up with an education system that builds itself around trying to suit those requirements. So I'll give an example. My daughter, she's in year two now. She was in year one last year, and her report card came to me at the end of last year. And one of the things that she's assessed on, like the actual thing itself, the category was uh, knows how to launch applications on a computer according to the standard procedures. She's 6 years old. Like, like what kind of bizarro thing is that to be measuring a person on? But, it's the culmination of years and decades of us trying to figure out how to get education equal for everybody, how to provide a fair education to every single kid when every single kid is different, and then how to figure out how we're doing it that. How do we measure that? Well, we measure it through tests, okay? Well, we need to standardize the tests, okay? Well, that means we need to standardize education. So, I think we've gotten here. That's how we've gotten here. But I think there's a way forward. I think like there's a bunch of people that are working on this at the moment. Like I said in the beginning, these ideas aren't controversial. If you look at, there was a report that came out a couple of years ago. It's like a vision for education in Australia over the next 20 years. And the report is called the Alice Springs Declaration. And there are three hopes or objectives that these are all the smartest people in education in Australia. And there are three things they hope for young people. And I can't quite remember all three, but the second one was creativity. So people know this, they understand it. It's just a really challenging and hard thing to change when we've got, decades of institutionalized systems that are in place, giant boards and departments of education and schools that exist on their own island. Like each school is unique and different, and they all operate according to the people and the principal and the deputy principal that run the schools. So it's challenging, but I think that there's a lot of people that want to change it, and I believe that young people will be served well if we can figure it out.
Yeah. Um, so just to shift gears a little bit, like if you can cast your mind back to your uni days,
Mm.
um, sort of could you like talk about how you sort of navigated life after uni and sort of like what were your sort of thoughts and feelings at
Mm.
that time?
Well, the first thing I'll say is I'm 39 years old, and so when I was at university was quite a long time ago. It was 20 years ago, not 20. It was like 15 years ago. I went a bit late, and I think universities and the pressure on young people has changed and like considerably since then. So differences that I've noted since I was at university. When I went to uni, you did one degree. Nowadays, every kid's got to do a double degree. When I was at uni, I had to do one set of work experience or work placement at the end of my degree. Most young people now are doing work experience, work placement, internships, grad programs from the first day of university. So I think things are very different now. But when I was there, how did I navigate it when I left? The truth is that I didn't, and I was too naive to have a plan or to understand, maybe how competitive the world was. I did a I did a like Bachelor of Arts in Communication with a major in theatre media. I did that at a regional university. And when I graduated, all I wanted was a job that I loved to do, that I liked. And so I didn't have the pressure of like 3 or 4 years worth of doing grad programs and then having to get the perfect job straight out of university. When I finished, I truly didn't know what I wanted to do. And so the first thing that I did when I graduated and I like my undergrad and I realized I didn't know what to do was I enrolled in a master's program. So I was like, I'll do another year because I've got a girlfriend who's a year below me and I don't know what I'm going to do yet. And I'm not sure I'll get a job just purely on my certificate. So I did that extra certificate. And I think I did it in like cultural events management it was like a certificate that later led to a master's. But that degree or that certificate trained me in something really tactical. It didn't just train me in it, it also gave me a certificate with the name, cultural events management. And from that, I all I did was go to the places that were advertising for the most jobs. Now, the places that advertise the most jobs generally is government because the government's the largest employer in Australia, and almost all of them have policies whereby they make every job available publicly. So they list them on Seek. So where does a kid graduating go to look for work? For me, I was like, I don't know, I'll go to Seek because that's the job search platform. But I didn't know what I was doing is the truth. And I went there and I saw jobs advertised at councils for events managers. So you can see the line was really, really clear between what I was trained in and what I went to. Um, I got a few months into doing that work. I worked for a few different councils, and I found it to be not very rewarding. Parts of it were rewarding. The best part of one of the jobs was at Marrickville Council when my boss, Siobhan, gave me an event to run on my own. So I got to be creative and I got to like do what I wanted to do with that event. She gave me a really long leash. So I realized after I ran my own event that the other work that I was being made to do or that I had to do was like a lot of low level like spreadsheets and copying data from one spreadsheet to another and yada yada. Like that's kind of the bones of event management. It's a lot of like admin type work. I didn't like it, but I knew that I loved music. And I was listening to a lot of music on this station called FBI. And I found bands that I liked, and I was getting in touch with them, just saying, "Hey, can I buy some records off you?" And they were writing back to me saying, "No, because we don't have any printed." And I was like, "Well, why not?" And I was like, "We don't know." And so I said, "Okay, well, how about I help you get some printed?" And I was offering to help bands, and I was just doing it for fun. And then after a few months of this, 6 months of just like doing something that I was really passionate about because I wanted to be closer to bands because I believed in the music, uh, I got one of the bands said, "Hey, do you want to just work with us more officially? Like you've helped us. Do you want to be our manager?" And I didn't know what that was. I had no idea what an artist manager was. Anyway, long story short, I started doing the work. I met a friend of mine from uni was doing the same thing, and so I asked him if he wanted to join up. And we started really tiny with small bands, and then we ended up with like over years of running our own business, platinum selling bands, selling 5,000 capacity venues, and that was my first job. I just made my own job, and it was just based on the fact that I just loved music and I followed that, and I didn't know where it would go. or if I was to be good at it or what it would lead to, but I just followed that passion that I had, which was music. And it led to a, 8 or 9 year career that saw me traveling all over the world and, going to festivals and concerts and hanging out with bands and all kinds of things I love. And this is like a really long answer, but I guess the point of that story is that I just was following my heart and I was just putting one foot in front of the other. I wasn't looking 10 or 15 years ahead or planning a career move. I just was doing what I wanted to do now. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I think that was the best way to prepare myself for the workforce and for like serious work. Is you let go of the false kind of thing that you're going to know what's coming in the future, because you don't, and you just do whatever you can, and you put one foot in front of the other, and that will lead to other things. Is that was my general belief at the time.
Yeah, like that's really different to, I mean, how I sort of thought about like my future, because um, like I think I can speak for other people as well a bit. That like there's sort of a pressure to actually sort of know what you sort of want to do
Mm.
with your life, but the way you sort of put it, um, it's sort of just being okay with uncertainty, I
Oh,
guess.
that's the key. The most interesting people I know are changing what they want to do with their life now at the age of 40 or 45 or 35. Like even if you come up with an idea now of what you want to do with your life, the process of moving through that and learning and working towards what you want will change what you understand about the world, and it will change what you believe, and it will change your values, and you'll end up coming to a point where you decide you want to do something differently. So, like something different. And so, like, there's just the idea that you'll know now what you want to do for the rest of your life is just so false and it's not realistic. Um, in my view, the best thing that you can do is do what you want to do now. Learn from that. Like, just dive into things that you want to do now and not worry about 10 or 15 years. Like, I mean, don't be silly about it. Like, if you want to go and be a street performer for the next 20, 10 years of your life, it's going to mean certain things for you as like a 30-year-old. Like, if you're juggling and circular key and all over the world for 10 years, like it's going to restrict the things that you can do later on. Like, don't be naive and think that that's not the case. But, you also can just choose to do things in the next like 3 or 4 years that you really like doing, because you just don't know what they're going to lead. Like, if you start going down a path, there's no way of knowing that at the beginning when you start on that path that there'll be other roads that lead off that path. You can't see down the road that you haven't been down. So if you start walking, have a bit of faith, you'll find that as you start walking down the road, there are other roads that branch off from there, and roads that you would not have had access to if you hadn't begun walking in the first place.
I mean, what I'd say to that is um, like I guess just speaking about my experience in uni, where like I was sort of, trying to think about what I wanted to do afterwards, and like I came across startups, and um, I thought of entering that field a bit. Like what was hard about it was like not knowing anyone, like any like other people who've actually done that, because it's sort of you only really hear about sort of more conventional pathways, right? So
Mm.
it's sort of like hard to make the leap when yeah, you just don't know anyone who's done it before.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I understand that. You can't see. Like, how do you know what you can't see? You don't know what you don't know. If you can't see it, how can you imagine it? It's really, really difficult to do that. But you know what? Like, the answer is you just go and you just start walking out into the world and you'll meet those people. If you've been at university and before that school, and been your life for your whole life, which is the case for most people, like, you're not going to know many people who have, I don't know, done things that are off the beaten path or like walked their own, created their own path, because you just know people who have been at school. So, like, I just think the way that you conquer that is by just starting something. Like, it doesn't mean you have to go out there and start your own thing from scratch. Like, it just means going at a job anywhere, somewhere that you think is slightly interesting, doing anything. Like, it doesn't matter. And, by exposing yourself, what do we say at Blackbird? We say you've got to increase the surface area of luck. and that applies. You got to increase the surface area of luck, serendipity of your network. Like, you don't actually you're not gonna encounter change or new things in your life if you don't actually take that first step somewhere. If that makes sense, you have to increase the surface area in your life for more things to happen.
Yeah, so your advice would just be just to do stuff, and
Just do
that's
things that
yeah,
speak to you. Again, don't be naive and think like, if you just want to go and sit on a mountain for 5 years, like, that might be good for you, but it's going to mean certain things for you afterwards. Like, you just don't know what that is yet. So don't be naive, but also, like, I just think just anything, do anything. Like, the alternative to doing anything is doing nothing and thinking about doing something, and you're doing nothing. You know what I mean? Like, if you're not doing something, you're doing nothing. So
yeah,
sitting around thinking about what you could do and worrying about it and stressing about the plan you have and what you need to do with your life, all the while you're doing nothing. When you could be doing something, anything.
mm,
I,
yeah,
I'll tell you, so my first bridging jobs out of university, I didn't get a job at council straight away. My first bridging jobs were, I kind of liked, I knew I liked events. Like, I liked putting on shows and I liked the experience they created for people. And, I liked making things like that. But I didn't know how to get a job yet later. I didn't have a job like in the field. And so what I would do is I was working for Sydney Festival and for the Domain, helping bump in and set up their shows. Now what that means is that, like, bumping in and setting up event work is like real, like, hard yakka. You basically, I remember there's one point I got up, I was staying at my mum's place at Copacabana on the Central Coast at the time, and I got up at 3 a.m. or 2:30 in the morning to drive to the train station in order to get me to Sydney in time for 5 a.m. And at 5 a.m., we met at Redfern, in the middle of, like, Redfern, at some, like, bizarro spot at a warehouse. We loaded up utes and we drove around the city, and we put up these, like, placards, signs. And I did that for 4 hours. I put the signs up all around the city. Another day, I was working in the Domain, and we were bumping in. They had these, like, opera in the Domain, jazz in the Domain, like symphony in the Domain, and then they had home bake and field day. There were all these, like, series of events in the Domain in Sydney, where they needed to be set up, and part of that was building semi-permanent structures that would sit on the site. So, like, roofs for site offices and walkways and shelters and things like that. Boss handed me a bucket of a giant, like, must have been 20-liter bucket of screws of 4 different sizes. And he said to me, we need to reuse these screws and we're going to put them on the roofs and on the gangways and on the other things, but we need to sort out the sizes. So I need you to sort through and separate a 20-liter bucket full of screws into their 4 different sizes. Like, is that what you imagine you would be doing after you graduate a 4 or 5 year degree? You've spent all this time in academia doing all this, like, hard work. You think that you're entering the world at a certain level, and then you're handed a bucket of screws to sort through. Like, my point is, like, I did it because I didn't know what else to do. But my point is, like, it's something. It was progress. Like, it was moving forward. And that led
mm,
to council, because I got to go into the councils and say, hey, I just do all this site work. I know how to do large scale events. And then after that, that led to me running music festivals and beer festivals and doing all these things, on my own. Like, it's like one thing led to another, led to another, led to another. The point is, though, when I had the bucket of screws in front of me, I had no idea that the bucket of screws would lead me to, having a band win ARIA awards and working in a venture capital firm. But each of those things led to it.
yeah. Like there's a like naturally I heard it's sort of like if you stand in the street, you can only really see what's around you, and sort of like it's only sort of like when you sort of start moving around, you can actually see like sort of be surrounded by a different environment. I guess that's just yeah. I guess one something I thought of.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
totally. Like, I agree, fully agree.
yeah,
But I don't know. Life is rich, full of experiences, but you've actually got to go and have them in order. in order for you to learn or to grow or to do anything really. So my advice always is don't get too caught up in thinking about it and your plan and your career and the prestige of where you need to end up. Just do something. As long as it speaks to you and you care about it, you got a shot at being happy.
Yep. Yeah. Thanks so much for like sharing all of your insights. So yeah, it was cool having you on, and um, yeah,
Cool, man. Ev, thanks so much for having me on. I'm sorry if I waffled, but I appreciate the opportunity to tell people about, I don't know, my career path. Has been like, I think, varied and a little interesting. And, some of the things that I know now as like an older person, just about some of the things I know just about, how you choose the right thing in life and what will lead you to be happy. Um, I guarantee you it's not the prestige stuff. Like, it's not the status stuff. Those things never lead you to be happy. It's following your heart and following things that you believe in and that you want to do, because you got to work for your whole life. Like, you work until you're physically incapable of working anymore, and so you want to make sure that that time is spent doing things that speak to you and that fill your heart up.
yeah, yeah. Well, it's a pleasure having you on, and
Cool,
yeah, um, yeah. Thanks.
awesome. Thanks so much, mate.
So here's where I talk about my takeaways and reflections on the chat. So starting with the first takeaway. So takeaway number 1. If you pursue what you enjoy, then things will fall into place. So yeah, so I mentioned one of the questions that there was a pressure to know what you wanted to do. And he mentioned that it's actually okay to not know, and in fact, it actually is impossible to know. And hearing about Joel's story, how he started in events management, worked in sort of like band, like working with bands and all that, and now he's working in venture capital, which is completely different to where he started in. So I think embracing that you can't know where you'll be in the future, but if you sort of, I guess, do what you love, then things will figure itself out. Yeah. So takeaway number 2, just start. So I resonate with this a lot just because I'm someone who just thinks way too much, so I don't actually end up doing anything. So yeah, just knowing that there actually isn't any right, first step, and what really matters is just that I do something, and because at least that way, I mean, it definitely is hard to trust in that, like that. Um, oh, like everything will be fine. But I also think it's not helpful to overthink things too much and really just doing things like applying for jobs, doing volunteering, anything, um, and just rolling with it. Yeah, and I need to take my own advice, but that's just what I took away. So